This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Deshaun Watson continues to be one of the most difficult players in the NFL to have an honest conversation about because a lot of people feel a lot of different ways about Deshaun. This is something that happens with players one way or the other, right? Either they're so loved that all of that positive momentum turns into nonstop positive energy until we're saying something ridiculous about a player that we all like, or a player we don't like is the recipient of the opposite of that, where all of that negative energy tends to snowball and snowball and snowball, and then we're left with a very inaccurate picture of who that is, right? This is something that's happened with Deshaun Watson. It's something that's happened with Russell Wilson. Name the quarterback that a lot, Dak Prescott, this has happened to. Like, name the quarterback that you don't like, Kirk Cousins, all of these guys, they have gotten snowballed to the point to where they actually start to get a little underrated because negative energy and positive energy kind of creates its own momentum, and people tend to go all the way when the positive energy is there, or go all the way when the negative energy is there, instead of just evaluating what's there, right? Because when you do evaluate what's there, people tend to throw you in one camp or the other. This is a tightrope that I've been following with Deshaun Watson and covering Deshaun Watson as somebody who cares about the football. This is a tightrope that I've had to walk since he's gotten to Cleveland, right? Because so many people were against this. Some people want this to work. Some people can see the upside to it. Some people can only see the downside to it. And if I bring up anything that's not squarely in any of those camps, people want to throw me in whatever camp they hate the most and label me as that. I'm not a Watson hater. I'm not a Watson fan, okay? I've never considered buying a Deshaun Watson jersey. I wasn't a big fan of him in Houston. I wasn't a big fan. I'm not a big fan of him now. I'm not checking out his jersey and saying all the four gospel that people be out there saying. I'm also not a hater. Like, I just want to evaluate what it is that I see and be honest with you about what it is that I see or don't see. Now, I know I'm going to say some positive things in this video about Deshaun Watson. That's going to cause some people to call me a Watson fanboy. Then I might say some negative things about Deshaun Watson in this video. And that's going to cause some people to call me a Baker bro, whatever the hell it is that they want to call me. I'm just putting this out there. I am of no camps. I just want to see the Browns win. In order to see the Browns win, I have to evaluate who it is that is playing quarterback. So please allow me to evaluate the quarterback position. If my evaluation is different than yours, then accept that. Like, it's just going to be a little different, right? That don't mean I'm evil. That don't mean I'm horrible. That don't mean nothing. That just means that me and you have a slightly different opinion. Or maybe we have the same opinion, but I didn't communicate my point clear enough. Now, with all of that being said, let's give a real evaluation of what Deshaun Watson was in 2023, because I feel like the truth has gotten lost in all of the tug and pull between these two camps. Because on one hand, you have people who will tell me that Deshaun Watson showed no promise in 2023, that he looked awful in every game that he played in, that he was never the reason the Browns won a single game, and that the experiment is a certified failure based on what they saw in 2023. And that assessment is just flat out wrong. I don't think that that that's an accurate assessment. There are other people who will tell me that we saw everything that we need to see from Deshaun Watson in 2023, and that the second half of the Baltimore game is so damn strong that we should just determine that he's back and he's going to be an MVP candidate next year. Yeah, that's wrong too. I think where Deshaun Watson is right now is squarely in the middle. I think both options are on the table for him. He could be a rousing success next year. He could be a big failure. It kind of just sits in the balance here. So I want to talk about what I felt like were his pros and his cons from 2023, what he can work on, what he can get better at, and who Deshaun Watson needs to be in order for the Browns to win a Super Bowl, which is also another important conversation. So let's talk about the pros first. I thought Deshaun Watson, when he was in there, did a pretty good job of managing the offense in most of his starts. You look at the Arizona game, he did a great job managing that offense, led to a 27-point victory over the Arizona Cardinals. The same thing for Tennessee. And I know people like to hand wave away those big blowout victories that the Browns had with Deshaun Watson at the helm, but that's not something I think you can hand wave away. It wasn't just a defense performance. When you blow out a team by 20 plus points, that means that you're getting good game management from the quarterback position because you're not turning the ball over, you're executing on your drives, and you're having a very long time of possession. I think his point differential kind of shows you how good he was at managing these games. Now, he wasn't the best in the league, but he was pretty damn good. Had a plus 62 point differential when he was out there as the Cleveland Browns starter. That's similar to Kansas City's in the regular season, which was at plus 63. So the point differential is at a very good place with Deshaun Watson. Compare that to Joe Flacco, who ended the regular season with who ended the entire season, including the postseason game, with -10 as his point differential number, and ended the regular season with a plus 21. And I think you know why Joe Flacco didn't have the greatest plus minus point differential numbers. It's because he turned the ball over a lot, created a lot of points on the offensive side for other teams. So that being the case, I thought Deshaun really did a good job of managing the game and the 4 wins that he had. The Cincinnati game, he did an excellent job managing that game in horrible weather. Nobody could throw the ball. Joe Burrow had 83 passing yards. I thought he did a good job of managing that game, making plays happen with his legs, and then scoring a touchdown that ultimately put that game out of reach. Thought Deshaun did a great job with that. I thought Deshaun did a great job. I've already mentioned it. The Tennessee game and the Arizona game. And I thought he did an excellent job managing that second half of the Baltimore game, because while people will be eager to point out he did not make great throws in that second half, right? He didn't make one spectacular throw. That's not really what's important, because the Browns were able to pull off a 14-point comeback because Deshaun Watson did an excellent job managing the game from that standpoint. Like, he realized what the situation was. He realized what he needed to do. He made some plays with his legs. He made some plays with his arms. He managed the game, created offensive momentum, and allowed the Browns to be in an opportunity to win that game. And that was one of his weaknesses coming into when he was traded for the Cleveland Browns, was his ability to manage a game. I think over the last couple of years, it has shown, like this last part of the season that he played, everything basically outside of the Pittsburgh game, I thought he took tremendous strides in his ability to manage the offense. And I think that's a good step going forward, because as much as we're talking about moving the offense around and making it more modern for Deshaun Watson, he's still going to have to be good at managing the game, because for the Browns to get to where they have to, he's going to have to manage the game at times. I thought he made tangible progress in his pocket presence. This was something that bugged me like hell when he first came back in 2022. His pocket presence was bad. His drops were bad in the pocket. He kept blowing his depth, making his tackles' lives harder. And there are times where Watson still makes his tackles' lives harder than they need to be, but that's part of his play style. But I thought he did a good job of mitigating that. I thought there were some really strong pocket gains for him, especially when he came in that second return that he had against Arizona and Baltimore. I thought he did a good job of staying in that pocket, just making throws out of that structure. Again, doing a better job managing the game than he did in 2022. And I thought the pocket presence was something that really showed in his improvement this year. Another thing that I think Deshaun Watson did well this year, and these are kind of all three things that go hand in hand. I saw him make some plus throws, some of the best throws I've ever seen a Cleveland Browns quarterback make. So he still has that ability to do that on a consistent basis. He also is still a very dynamic athlete, still was very dangerous with his legs moving on the run. So you know that he hasn't diminished there to a point to where he's unusable. And to me, I see him play football, and when it's going well for him, I think to myself, this is a guy who still has all the tools he needs to live up to his potential. And when I say his potential, I don't mean live up to what he was in 2020. I mean live up to what people thought Deshaun Watson could eventually grow into be back then, right? He still has not reached that potential. He still has the ability to live up to that potential. So that's the positives, right? I think he has all the tools. He could throw, he could run. He shown the ability to process things well. Once he was getting a little comfortable with Amari Cooper, they were drawing up plays, making great throws, the pocket presence, and he managed the game better. I think if he played a full season, we would be on the uptick with how we feel about Deshaun Watson. But unfortunately, he had an injury-riddled season, and we only got 5 games, and 5 games isn't going to change anybody's mind. Just the way that it goes. I thought it was more good than bad this year, but 5 games aren't going to change what anybody thinks one way or the other. Here are the cons for Deshaun Watson. Still was late to pull the trigger a lot, right? While he did a better job managing the game, while he did a better job playing in structure, to me, it is clear that that is a secondary mode for Deshaun Watson. That is something that you can go to if you have to go to it, but it's not something you want to rely on as his primary play style. He did a good enough job managing the game, but he's clearly not at his best when he's doing that. The Browns have made some moves to make sure that that's not the case. Because like the being late to pull the trigger, like the stuff where he doesn't get the ball out the top of the drop all the time, kind of over processing, overthinking things in structure. Those are the things where, ball comes out late, gets tipped, gets intercepted, where it still becomes an issue with him. So obviously I think the Browns identified that and thought to themselves, okay, we need to make a little bit of an adjustment here. Also, he still had weird mechanical issues pretty much his entire run out there. Now, I don't know how much of this had to do with the injury or whatever, but all I can do is evaluate what I see on the field. And too many times have I seen him throw too many errant footballs that to make me comfortable with, right? Either his base is off, his upper half is off. He just consistently throughout the season, despite how short it was for him, had these weird mechanical issues pop up where it would look like his body is still getting used to playing football. And that was something I was willing to be okay with in 2022. But 2023, it really shouldn't happen. In 2024, it's going to be jarring if it happens again there. So that's a big concern for me. Why did he have all these issues with his mechanical consistency? Now, maybe this is something that's always happened with him, and I'm just worried about nothing, and that could be the case, but I don't think it is. I think this is something that popped up after his 700-day hiatus from football, and it's still there. There were throws in the Cincinnati game where you're like, where the hell was that supposed to go? Like, not like in the way of he just made a bad throw. It was like, okay, you could tell that his base was just so far off that ball didn't get anywhere, and there was really no reason for his base to be that far off. There were throws like that in almost every game that he played in, including the Baltimore one. So whatever is causing that is a concern to me. Also, he's got to have a better timer in his head of when to let a play die, right? Because that's where you see the worst stuff. with him, when he throws the ball backwards to Elijah Moore, when he's playing off of injury and decides to run all the way to the sideline and throw across his body and get hit in the middle of the air and throw an interception in Indianapolis, right? Like, these are the things where it kills you that Deshaun Watson does. And he has to learn to let some dreams die quicker, because he has to be safer with the football. He has to create less turnovers. And quite frankly, he's not at that point anymore where he can just live like that and we're fine living with the result on the extreme cases, because he's not going to be as capable as he was in his early 20s of making those kind of plays. I think he's going to be a guy who's better in the pocket, and maybe he's moving, but he's moving while his feet are set. I don't think he's going to be off platform, throw across his body guy. And I don't think he's ever really been that in the NFL. So, and people are going to disagree with that, because you can look up some highlights of him like throwing across his body and it working out, but like, the highlights aren't reality. There's a lot of times where that didn't work out for Deshaun. And I think it's time for him to have that acceptance of letting some dreams die. And health has to just be a bigger priority to him. That's the biggest concern for me going forward with Deshaun Watson. And honestly, the biggest concern I had all season with him is that it just doesn't feel like health is a priority to him. He seems like it's more important to get that extra yard. It's more important to him to have that reputation for being a tough guy than it is for him to be healthy and on the football field. And it's just not worth it for everybody else that's associated with this team. Whether you are a Flacco fan or not, you kind of have to admit the Browns were a better team with Deshaun Watson. And you really don't want to be in this position where you wonder what the Browns could have done in the playoffs if Deshaun Watson could have stayed healthy, because the last time we saw him healthy, he was able to beat the 1 seed on the road. So now we're in this situation where we had to see Joe Flacco try to step in and do it, and that's not what we paid for. We want to see Deshaun kind of be in that moment so we can have our best chance to win, and we haven't. Like, he has to have his health be a priority for him. It just has to happen. It has not been the case this year or any year prior. He has to take the steps this offseason for his health to be a priority. And this goes to my main point. I don't want Deshaun Watson to be who he was in 2019 or 2020. I don't want him to revert back to that. I think so many people just want him to play good and put up good numbers that they're willing to accept him reverting back to 2020. That's not what I want. I want him to be a different not a different quarterback, a more evolved version of who he would be and who he was in 2020 or 2019. I want him to build off of that plus pocket assassin potential that he has, because his arm talent is spectacular. His ability to stay tall under pressure is spectacular. His ability to have contact balance after being hit in the pocket is spectacular. And those are all things that I think he can use to really, really use his potential as a passer more. And I thought he showed signs of improvement in that area. He does not have to replicate 2020. You don't want him to replicate 2020. Yes, he's a great athlete. Yes, he can throw on the run. Yes, he can do those things, and you're going to want him to do those things when he needs to do those things, right? Same way with Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes gets 66 yards in the Super Bowl. Nobody's upset with that, right? But if Pat Mahomes was the second leading rusher on the Kansas City Chiefs, then people would start to ask questions about that, right? So, again, his athleticism cannot be part of the main course of that plate of what he brings to the table. It has to be a side dish, right? And I think he'll be better off for it. That, not saying he shouldn't be an athlete, not saying you shouldn't use him as an athlete. Obviously, you want to use those things and let him play make. But also, you want to see him build on his ability to manage a game, which I thought he showed steps in being able to do that well. You want to see him be that playmaker, but you also want to see him play make from that pocket a little bit more often, just because it's safer and it's going to keep him upright more often. And quite honestly, I think at this point, he's a much better player when he's staying within the confines of that pocket. Now, again, He's going to have times where he breaks out there, makes a great play, improvises. We all know that he's capable of doing that. But I do think that you're going to get the most wild plays from Deshaun Watson. And honestly, when I watch his old tape from Houston, the most wild plays I get from him are when he's standing in that pocket, throwing that ball downfield, and he looked like C.J. Stroud did. Right? Like, that's where you get the best throws. That's where you get the stuff that makes you remember why a team would want to give this dude $230 million. And that's where I think he has to really get the majority of his plays from. For him to win a Super Bowl with this team, which is definitely possible. This is a Super Bowl caliber roster that he is on. He's going to have to be comfortable managing a game, or as comfortable managing a game as he is playmaking. I think they were leaning too much on him managing a game in that old offensive, well, not the old offensive system, but with the old staff, the old offensive coordinator, Alex Van Pelt. I think they leaned too far on him being a game manager and his ability to manage a game versus him being a playmaker. I thought there was room for him to be more of a playmaker. I think you have to kind of have a 50-50 balance of it, right? There are games where you want him to playmake, where you want him to make the big throws, where you want him to throw on the run, where it's going to be crazy hectic and you're going to need that old Deshaun Watson. You're going to have games like that. You're also going to have games like Baltimore, where you don't need him to be that guy and you just need him to manage the game well, get the ball out quick, get the ball in the hands of the playmaker, small cuts to Baltimore, and that makes him bleed. And then you can take a big hit with a run or a big time throw. He's going to have to be comfortable doing both. He can't go back to 2019. He can't go back to 2020. If he wants to win a Super Bowl, he has to be more evolved. He has to be as comfortable managing a game as he is playmaking a game. He has to do both. That's what Deshaun Watson needs to be. The good news is that in the 5 games that he played, I thought there were signs of him becoming a better manager of the game. Now, playmaking, he didn't really get that much of an opportunity to do that. When he did, there were some things that were done, but when it comes to managing that game, I thought he made steps in doing that. And when it comes to his playmaking ability, we kind of know that he can do that, right? Like, that's what his tape in the NFL is, all in Houston. I don't think he forgot how to play football. So Deshaun is at that point. He's at a crossroads in his career. He's going to have to evolve. He's going to have to be a different player than he had been before, a slightly different version of who he has been before. This isn't about turning the clock back for him. This is about evolving, taking that next step, opening that book in getting into a new chapter. Houston Deshaun Watson and how Houston Deshaun Watson played, that's done. Now it's about what Cleveland Deshaun Watson's going to be. That has to be a different player. That has to be a different style. That has to be a more evolved player than what he was. And if he is able to do that, if he's able to evolve, this team will be a serious Super Bowl contender. But if he's not, then this team will have some issues breaking past the Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and the Josh Allen and the Joe Burrow ceiling, right? Getting into that realm, they're going to have a hard time doing it. They'll get to the playoffs. They'll get to the second round. But as far as being a serious contender for the Super Bowl, if he's not able to evolve to that point, then you're going to have issues there. So that's my thoughts. Everything that the Browns wanted from this trade is absolutely still on the table with Deshaun Watson. The issue is that everything that you fear about this trade coming into being is still on the table as well. And if that sounds familiar, that's exactly where we stood with this trade last year. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.